You're listening to The Weekend Take. And now your host, Sean Schaefer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Weekend Take. I'm your host, Sean Schaefer, and with me this week is director of Broken Swords, The Last in Line, Michael Babbitt. How are you doing this week, Michael?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on, and as fans of the show might remember, Michael was co-host on Season 1 of The Weekend Take, and he's back now to discuss what has now been released and available in some retailers nationwide and more coming in January. Broken Swords, The Last in Line, which when we last spoke was simply titled The Last in Line, a saga of the Broken Swords, but has since had a bit of a name change. So, Michael, it's available in stores now, is it not?
That is correct. It's actually available in Walmarts across the country. It's going to be available for sale on Blu-ray and DVD starting in early January on Amazon.com. And there's potential of other retailers as well next year. We don't yet know any of those in particular, but there are other possibilities for the retailers that it might start showing up in, including like Redbox. And then at some point, probably second quarter, I'm guessing, second, maybe third quarter of next year is when it'll start being available for video on demand.
Great to hear. It's certainly nice to be able to, hopefully, in your case, sit back and...
Oh, I'm done. I'm done. It's been a little surreal because this is our first feature film and our first actual release that got picked up and actually distributed. The first pictures that we received because we didn't know it was getting released. We were still in the waiting zone. We hadn't heard from the sales agents in a while and still waiting. And I got a text from one of our crew members that was part of the film, Shane Norton, our key grip. He texted me with a picture of him holding it in Walmart. And I was like, what the hell is that? And then it all just started tumbling out and other people started finding it across at their Walmarts and stuff like that. I'm hoping pretty soon it'll be actually on their website because it's not available yet on the Walmart.com website. I don't know if that's because of limitations with the distribution or whatnot, but it will be on Amazon in January.
Very cool. Yeah, I imagine that because Amazon typically fulfills from different retailers, I wouldn't be surprised if when it went live on Amazon, you'd also start seeing it on Walmart's website. For a lot of people listening to the show and just a lot of people in general, a lot of people approach hearing when someone says that they made a film and it's available. And we were talking about prior to coming on the air that, you know, when you first tell somebody I'm an independent filmmaker, the first thing they ask is, well, is there something that you've done that I can see? And up until now, the answer mostly been no, but now you can say yes. Now go buy the movie and here it is. But a lot of people think, well, you write a script, get the money, and you make a film, and then it's out. And it's just they relate all of the film industry with kind of the factory-like way that studios just kind of churn out genre pictures and this picture and that film and how they have like a slate of pictures. But that's certainly not the case in the independent film world. And especially with this film, you know, it wasn't, hey, we'll just get some people together, shoot a film and do that. And they always seem to forget the money part is always...
Oh, yeah, well, that's...
They always forget the money part as if it just like magically appears, like, you know.
Didn't you know all independent filmmakers, you can make your movie without any money. You should go ahead and do that. I mean, you don't need money to make your movie. And I do want to say that is definitely true, but there are a lot of things that money can also help with.
Yes, absolutely. People think that, you know, you just put your script under the pillow and the funding fairy shows up and leaves you, you know, whatever your proposed budget is in your proposal. That's certainly not the case in independent filmmaking. Certainly not the case with Broken Swords, as how much of your life was consumed from conception to now where you say, all right, I'm done in creating Broken Swords?
I started working on the idea for the film in January of 2015. And apart from 2 short films that I shot at the end of that year, that's all I've worked on up until it was released in early December of this year. So that's almost 5 years to the date. I mean, there have been a lot of times where there's not been any movement on anything. So I've been stuck in this kind of holding pattern of what can I do now to help with whatever process the film is in, whether it was pre-production, production, post-production, or the sales stuff. But for the most part, it's been pretty all-consuming. It's been hard for me to go, okay, I need to move on to other things because there's still so much stuff that had to be done with this film. Now it's like, I feel like I can kind of put it to rest, except for the fact that I wrote a sequel. That was something I wouldn't even entertain until basically June of this year, because the sales agent said that, you know, there's possibilities at times that can happen where if the film does well, distributors will come back and say, do you have another one? And so I want to be able to at least have a script so that I can say, hey, we don't have another film, but we do have a script, and if you'd like to fund it, because some of these distributors also fund movies. The distributor that actually is the main distributor for our film, they actually do produce films as well. So who knows what can happen? I just wanted to be ready in case that ever happens.
Okay, and now taking a step back to look at an even larger picture, you know, every film that you see on the screen started with a script, and every script started with a story idea. And in the case of Broken Swords, you spent a large amount of time in creating this world with Christopher Lee Jones, and a lot of it is based in your 40 years as a dungeon master.
You're going to out me, aren't you?
Right, we outed you. We outed you in season 1 of the Weekend Take when you were on.
Yes, I love Dungeons and Dragons. There, I said it. And I loved it before it was cool. So that makes me cool. No, it doesn't really, but
that just makes you the hipster dungeon master.
That just makes me a grognard is what that makes me.
So it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to make an action film, and, you know, let's say you make a police drama, and this cop is partnered with this guy, and the partner dies. Like there are certain templates and formulas that a lot of studios follow, but when you're looking at something as original as Broken Swords, it isn't just, okay, I'm going to place these characters I have in my head in a real world setting that is tangible to me, and I have experiences having been there. Like, oh, people set their films in New York City or in Europe. Everything about the Broken Swords is made from scratch, made from the imagination and ability to world build from that experience of playing Dungeons and Dragons as long as you have.
Chris and I are both very we're pretty immersive storytellers. We will go into detail about something that will most likely never even end up in the script. Like all of the characters in the Broken Swords, they all have fairly extensive backstories that we created, talked about, brought about, and some of these were informed also by the actors once they were cast and they were brought in. Things would get added to the idea of who they were that, you know, hopefully breathes life into that. And it's the same thing with the world. There are a number of different places that are mentioned in the script, in the film, that they talk about these other places that you never see, but we created a real backstory for many of these places. And I think for both of us, it probably comes from, I mean, we were both huge readers when we were kids and growing up. Both of us were big fans of Dungeons and Dragons and played it a lot. And I think that whole storytelling aspect comes from that creation. When you're creating something special, Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop game. So it was video games when I was playing were at a very, very infant level at that point. I mean, I was there when Pong came out. Okay. So, and I was playing D&D when Pong came out. So all the imagination was in the people sitting around the table telling the story. So in order to better create that, you had to be able to paint pictures with your words and with images you could possibly draw or find, things like that. It's now even better because you can go find artwork. Like with our film, when we were getting ready for Broken Swords, I collected hundreds, if not thousands, of photographs that I gave the production design team and said, you guys just need to start going through these and looking at these. Some of them in particular I would call out, but most of them I was just like, I just want you to look at them over and over to start living in it. So you start getting a feeling for the atmosphere that we're trying to create, the mood and tone we're trying to set for it. I would say for both Chris and I that a huge part of that has to be our experience playing Dungeons and Dragons. And we did it before we knew each other, and then we met in college in the early 90s, and we pretty much been gaming kind of since, as long as we've been able to actually game.
This world, and you said that there's a lot of things that you and Chris created and discussed that, you know, never finds its way into the script, never finds its way onto the screen, but is all part of that world building. And, you know, you can't know where you're going without knowing where you came from. And so looking at the members of the Broken Swords, many of them are from different regions of this world, different communities. And in each case, they have a backstory. Now, some of their backstories are alluded to in the film. For instance, there's a moment where Reaper and Whisper are talking to one another, and we learn about how Reaper became a broken sword. So
Correct.
there's just that one discussion, but in that one discussion, it tells a lot about the culture and society that Reaper comes from and how they view women's roles in the society. And
In the particular one she came from.
right, that's what I'm saying.
Well, if you juxtapose that with everything else you see with the broken swords, it's a collection of men and women, and gender is never an issue. It's never brought up except in that one instance where you hear about Reaper's backstory and where she came from. So the broken swords themselves, it's a non-issue.
Right.
So there's another land in this place where gender roles are seen as a little bit more conditioned, I guess is the word I'm looking for. I don't know how to describe that, but are sort of more regimented. That, you know, there's certain ways people do things in that particular society.
Right. And so that's what I'm getting at is it's just one small example of when you and Chris built this world and you worked together and the script was laid out. It wasn't just, oh, they're going to have this dialogue and Reaper's going to reveal this about her just because it seems like a good motivation for her to become a broken sword. It's when you guys did that, you had already in your minds, you knew exactly the culture she came from and how everything was laid out. It wasn't so much that it was dialogue as that you had built this region.
Yeah, Chris and I would talk like in the very early stages of, because I spent from like January to probably March futzing around with, okay, what could be the potential idea, what could be the potential plot story idea of this film. So I did that for a couple of months trying to figure out, whenever I'm trying to germinate ideas, I listen to a lot of music, I read more, do stuff like that. And once I hit upon the idea, it wasn't actually, Chris didn't come on board then until around probably, I approached him about in April and I said, hey, so we're thinking about doing this. Here's what we want to do. Would you be interested in developing the script? And he was like, sure. So from that point on, we spent several months where we would get together on the phone. And at that time, he had not moved back to Houston. So he was still in Taiwan. So, you know, it'd be 7 p.m. here and it'd be 7 a.m. there. And we would spend about an hour and we'd talk about stuff. And he was doing the actual physical writing of the script. And we would talk about things and he would send some pages over and I would read those pages. I'm like, oh, this is great, dude. As we would talk, we would build in characteristics. We'd talk about different characters. For Chris and I, we mesh really well together because he's really good with dialogue and plot. And I think I'm really good with character and character motivation. And so the two, when we put those together, they tend to mesh really well. So he would be weaving this plot and I would be talking about character motivations, and then he would work those into the things. Sometimes I might write a little snippet of something and I'd send it to him and said, here, make this better. but, you know, he would get the idea because he would know I'm coming from the whole character motivational aspect of things. And he would fit that into the overall plot line. And as we would work things out, we actually didn't start writing until we had really talked a good deal about the kind of world we wanted to set and we would start throwing out details to each other, start creating ideas of like, I remember we spent a half an hour on one conversation trying to come up with the name of the mercenary unit. Cause you were like, you know, we need a good name for the mercenary unit. What's going to be the name of it? And we went through all, and don't ask me what some of them are because I could not remember what some of the other options that we had were. But we eventually ended up with the broken swords because, you know, the idea was that these are mercenaries and oaths in this world are very important. They play a really large role in the story. If you listen to the idea of, which is where the God hutches come from, you know, making a promise when you swear on a God hutch. It's not like here in our world where, you know, oh yeah, I swear in the Bible. You know, a lot of people don't believe that, but they still do it. In this world, it's actually a binding contract. And because of that, how do you step away from the society you are part of to join this one unit that is loyal to everybody that's part of the unit and loyal permanently? Because once you become a member, there's only one way you leave.
And that is by death.
Yes. Yeah. You know, we would really talk in depth about this. It's always a lot of fun because we're throwing out all kinds of ideas. And again, at this point, I couldn't remember ideas that we jettisoned or kept. Well, I mean, one actual physical idea is I don't think this is giving away too. This isn't actually a plot so this is not a spoiler. But they use communication devices in their magical communication devices called torques. Well, the torques are actually a symbol of them being in the broken swords, but the torque actually also acts as a magical communication device. Originally in the script, in the first like 4 or 5 drafts of the script, the communication device was a completely separate item that we called a spark. One rewrite that I got back from him, I'm reading through and I realized, wait a second, where are the sparks are gone? He's put them on the torques, and it was brilliant because one, it got rid of a prop we had to make. And it condensed things down, and he said it just seemed like a more natural thing that they, since they're wearing these torques anyway that designate their rank and that they're members of the Broken Swords, why isn't that the communication device as well? So it was brilliant. So it's things like that happen in the whole process that we both really like doing.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks.
Let's take a bit of a kind of a chronological approach at this point. So you said January 2015, you have the idea to write this script.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a particular event or something that kind of spurred on the idea, like, I'm going to write this story?
Definitely. Like I said, I like to listen to a lot of music. Not only am I a Dungeons & Dragons player, but I'm also a huge heavy metal fanatic. So I listen to a lot of metal music, all different subgenres of metal. I happen to be listening over and over again to an album called This Glorious Burden by Iced Earth, which is a band out of Florida. The album's all about various battles throughout history. The one in particular is this 3-song trilogy about the Battle of Gettysburg. And Pickett's Charge is the second song, the middle song of the trilogy. And I suddenly thought to myself, what the hell? And I'm a vet, so I spent 6 years in the military, and this kind of really hit home. But I thought, what the hell? Because this, if you know anything about Pickett's Charge, it's this massive suicide charge that the Confederates were going to do in order to take out this northern embedded unit on top of this hill that was keeping the South from getting to Washington, D.C. But it's this huge, like 3.25 mile open terrain that they were going to charge across with these cannons shooting at them, and suicide mission. And General Lee decided that was going to happen the next morning. So General Lee told his generals, who went back and told their lieutenants, who went back and told their sergeants, who then had to go back to the individual soldier groups and say, hey guys, tomorrow morning at dawn, we're going to pick up and we're going to run across that field and take that hill. And I thought, what the hell went through that soldier's mind when the sergeant came back and said that? And thus was born the story of the Broken Swords, the last 90 minutes of what potentially is a suicide mission that they are given roughly 20 minutes into the film. So that's how it started. And then from there, obviously, we took massive liberties because it's not the Battle of Gettysburg. And then, creating our own mythology behind, we have a pantheon of gods that these people worship, and that permeates their society that they talk about, the magic that they use. One of the things about magic for me is I like magic that has a price. Whatever that price may be, that price varies in different ways. And all that stuff just started creating, and we just started going to town with it. And so that was the general overall gist of the story. And then the plot itself began to unfold as, we worked out the characters and threw them in the mix and decided where this was going to go.
So January 2015, the idea springs to life.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you approached Chris in April
Mm-hmm.
of 2015 about that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then Chris comes on board. From April 2015 until about when are you working out the script?
If I remember right, I'm pretty certain we had the rough draft was done by November. It might have been a little earlier, but it was somewhere around October, November of 2015, because we knew we wanted to do production fall of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So the draft was finished then, and that was first draft, and it went through. And when I got the first draft, now we'd been working at from roughly April, May, a little time off in between there, because somewhere around here also he did move to Houston, and I can't remember if that was 2000. That might have been really early 2016. So that was all coming down the pipe from him. So he was, there was a lot of stuff he was doing out in Taiwan that he was having to get all his stuff in order to be able to do that. So around October, November, and then when we got it, we immediately obviously would start working on the second draft, talking about things that don't work, talking about things we wanted to enhance, going through it, and we would spend the next roughly 9 months, 10 months doing that. Meanwhile, while we're doing that, I'm also gearing up to start pre-production. So, because I knew we were going to need to start pre-production sometime in the summer of the next year. So we wanted to start planning everything. There's costume designs have to be done, set design has to be done, all that kind of stuff. So that all began in earnest sometime around like December, January, and then putting together the team for it all happened in that first 3 months of that year of 2016 to start really launching into stuff by probably April, May or so of 2016 to start building. And we ended up actually beginning the build of the set around June, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. We're still working on the script. We're still doing some casting. We're still doing, we're doing the set design. Costumers are working on the costume design. My makeup people have started coming up with their ideas, so I'm getting floods of images, floods of test stuff. All this is going on, arranging flights for cast members and crew members that are going to be coming in March of 2016. Someone decided to come in and they wanted to actually be investors in the film. So they wanted to actually put some money in. That eventually ended up not happening. And that money was pulled from us a month and a half before we were supposed to shoot. And so all the money we'd been spending up to that point was our own funding that we were putting into the film. But our liquid cash, we spent all this prep putting all that in place, and we kept getting this, we kept asking about the money that was going to be put in, that they kept saying, yeah, it's coming. And then it got to the point where we didn't have any more liquid cash anymore. So we needed these funds to get through production. And we told the person and they said, well, they don't have it. So I was terribly frustrated, but again, as a first-time filmmaker, I will say this was a lesson learned. And it's something, it's something I've known for a long time. In this industry, if you haven't realized that people promise a lot of stuff, people will tell you all the time how much they want to help you work on something, how much they want to help you do something, how much they're willing to put money in for something. But until you actually have a check in hand, I'm going to tell you right now, do not believe it. Now, that's not being cynical, that's just being practical, because it was a good lesson for us. We didn't have it. We couldn't go any further. We literally could not do anything. We had to stop. So I had to tell everybody about 4 or 5 weeks out. I had to say, guys, the film is canceled. We're canceling shooting. We'd already bought plane tickets for people. We'd already rented all the equipment that was scheduled to be shipped in. We had to rent weapons for the film because that was one of the props that we didn't make. We actually rented weapons from a rental house and then decorated them. The overall budget for the film was $150,000. That's all the way through post-production and all the sales stuff that eventually got added to it. It's been $150,000. So we'd spent roughly about a third of that already by August of 2016 to get ready for this production. And now we had to cancel it because there's no way we couldn't shoot. To say that I was, there were a lot of motions going on. We'll just leave it at that. So that takes us up to about August 2016.
Okay, so August 2016, this happened. Feels like the rug gets pulled out from under you at this point when these investors don't follow through. You're already $50,000 into the pot at this point. You've committed $50,000 to the pot in creating this film. And at this point, like you said, there's been actors have been cast, sets have been built and designed, wardrobe, props. All this is going on. And I know at one point prior to this, you almost did the equivalent of screen tests, but more of like a proof of concept.
Yeah, that was until after that was until after this, actually.
Okay, so we'll get to that then in a second. So at this point, was there ever even a little voice in the back of your head that told you that to get out, to kind of quit before you get in too deep, or were you always just committed, like, look, I've already committed this much to the pot, I'm seeing this through no matter what? Was there ever a doubt to just stop there, to kind of...
Oh hell yeah I told everybody I was done. I told everybody when I canceled it, people were coming back to say, and I'm like guys, I'm done with this. I do not want to talk about it. I don't want to see this again. I've put way too much into this and it's just all falling apart. it was a very emotional experience because I mean, everybody was exhausted. And we'd been working a long time on this. And I mean, I was working pretty physical day job as well at the same time. So I would do that during the day. I would come home and spend 4 hours down in the barn by myself, putting up, working on the set to put up stuff in the set and stuff like that. So I was emotionally and physically exhausted. So it was kind of like, it was sort of the last straw for me, but luckily I have a lot of great people that work on the team because, and that leads to the whole proof of concept thing. My wife, who is also our producer and who is the angel of the entire thing, she apparently behind my back started talking with some of the actors who were really expressing interest in wanting to try to figure out ways to help out. Again, this all comes back to the help out thing. At this point, the help out thing was money. None of these actors are going to be able to help out with the money. So I didn't really see, I had tunnel vision. Well, she said, she and some of the actors talked about stuff and they arranged and said, hey, look, the weapons are being rented. Some of the set is mostly finished. Why don't we just take 2 days and film a couple of scenes, just as, proof of what we can do. And initially I was like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm done. I'm so done. And I let it sit for a couple of days and then I came back and I said, okay, I will do this, but all I want to do is show up and direct it. I put so much into this right now. If I have to work more, if I had to still throw out more of myself right now, I'm not sure I can do that. So she goes, okay, we'll do that. We'll do that. Well, it didn't end up being quite like that. I still had to do a lot of other stuff, but people did start picking up things. They arranged dates. They talked to me about times. They talked about me about certain things. They wanted to do some things that I was just like, no, I don't want to do that. That's going to take way too much effort for what we need to do. If we're going to do this, let's keep them simple. So we put together and filmed those 2 proof of concept scenes, which are actually on the Blu-ray, believe it or not.
They are. I've watched them.
I know. I was surprised because they're labeled as deleted scenes, but they're not deleted scenes. They're actually proof of concepts. But it was cool that they put them on there because I thought that was, you get to see the early idea of what it was supposed to be like. Now this wasn't we didn't have the entire crew, or we had all of the actors that were originally in those roles actually did do the scenes. We particularly picked the actors that were local because we couldn't afford to bring in the ones that were from out of state because it was too costly. And we couldn't pay for this. So that was one of the things, we are out of money. So we literally can't pay for it. So anyway, it all got put together. We filmed these proof of concepts, but over the course of October, when we filmed those, and then into November, as I was putting them together in December, I was able to sort of breathe a little bit, start to let my head clear, start to, go, lesson learned, lesson learned, lesson learned. Yes, I got this. Yes, I got this. Yes, I got this. At the beginning of January, I decided, you know what? We have to do this. So Chris and I talked about how we were going to do this. But the one thing that we said was, we have to secure funding and know that we actually have the full amount of money that we need before we do anything. Now, we'll look for other funding if other people want to come in, but we both said we want to know we can pay for everything to get this film finished if it has to, so that this situation would never happen again. So if somebody came and said, I want to throw in some more money, we'd be like, great, that's great. Oh, well, I don't have it right now. Oh, okay, that's great. But, let's work on talking about, what your investment might be. And then if it still fell through, we could still finish the film.
Right.
That was very important.
This moment in time is now January 2017, you're saying?
Early 2017, yes.
In August 2016, the rug gets pulled out. The potential investor just doesn't have the money, drops off the face of the planet. 2 months later, Krista, being the angel that she is, gets everyone together, convinces you to come and direct the proof of concept scenes.
Mm-hmm.
For the listeners, this wasn't something that, okay, we're arranging it and there's a set someplace. For the listeners who don't know, this was something that you almost kind of had to see every day in the wake of this unfortunate incident of this investor disappearing, because the sets, as you were constructing them, are
on our property. Yeah, it's on our property. Yeah. We have a barn in our backyard that we basically converted into it wasn't a full-fledged sound studio, but in a sense, it was kind of like filming in a sound studio. And we created the barn inside that, and in our standalone carport where we created the second floor of the barn. Yeah. So we built everything in the backyard. So every day I woke up, In fact, I'm still waking up to it because it hasn't. We've been slowly tearing it down because we've been auctioning stuff off and people have been buying it, but I'm still reminded of it every day.
So I got to imagine in August 2016 when this happens, looking out your window was the last thing that you wanted to do, I'm sure.
Oh, it was definitely, yes.
So now January 2017 comes on and you and Chris talk and say, we're going to move forward, but only if all the funds are secured. So now we're 2 years removed from the idea first popping into mind.
Right.
In 2 years, we've gotten as far as, okay, we have the set mostly built.
Well, no, it still wasn't even mostly built because when we stopped everything. So there was a lot to do. And see, that kind of leads into why 2017 turned out to be a major blessing. You could even say this person not providing the funds turned out to be a major blessing.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks.
Well, I know one thing happened at the end of 2016. You know what it was? You got an email from some schlub.
Oh, some schlub emailed me and said, "Hey, I'd be interested in your movie if you're looking for a cinematographer." And I said, "Well, we've actually got a cinematographer, but I'll keep your stuff in mind because that's really cool." Some schlub named Sean.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Actually, that was because I think that was somewhere in like November or December, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was right at the end of 2016.
Yeah. So it was really cool. But even better was in January when we started to build this up, I reached out to everybody that had been a part of it before. And I said, "Hey, guys, so we have secured funding. This is going to happen. This is not like before when we made the mistake of not having secured funding. The funding is secured. Well, obviously barring somebody dying or something like that, like, something really tragic happening, but we're going to get this done." So I reached out to everybody and said, "Here's what it is. We'd like to shoot again around the same time this year that we were going to shoot last year. So end of October, beginning of November. We want to put out the feelers right now to find out what possible dates are available." And so some people started trickling back in, "Well, I've got these dates available." And we eventually settled on a specific set of dates, which are the dates we actually ended up shooting on. It was October 27th through November 13th, I believe. So we set those dates, told everybody this was all through January and February. And one of the people that hadn't responded was the original cinematographer. And I kept reaching out to this person, kept reaching out to them constantly, calling them, emailing them, texting them, Facebook messages. "Hey, man, we're talking about doing this. If you're not interested, it's cool. Just let me know." So but I want to give you the first. Never, ever heard back from him. Well, then some schlub again in February emails me again to say, "Hey, how things going? I hope you're, doing well with the pre-production for The Last in Line." And I said, I said, "Well, it just so happens that the cinematography position is actually open." So this guy, Sean, and we started talking, and I have to say, Sean, just from the get-go, it was really easy to talk to you about stuff. And it was a great working relationship. And I could tell it was a good working relationship because you asked me a lot of questions and you seem invested in it. So I loved your demo reel. So we just started talking, and, then I broached price. You sent me some price things. I said, "What about this?" You said, "What about this?" And I said, "That's doable. Let's do that." So that was sometime early March, I think, late February, early March when we kind of secured that, right?
Yeah, it was right around March, if I recall.
And from that point on, as far as the cinematography side of things and the visual aspect side of things, we just hit the ground running. And you and I had obviously conversations throughout the next 7 months. But, there was a lot of other stuff that was going on too. There was the blessing in disguise, aside from getting you as the new cinematographer, which was, if people don't look at this movie and see how beautiful it looks and feels in the film itself, of framing and all that kind of stuff. The light, every time I watch it, I'm like, God, I want people to see this movie. That goes to the production design, the costume design, the makeup, everything about this. And we were so detailed. And so I remember you walking on the set the first day when you showed up, and you were like, holy shit. Wow. Because you'd only seen pictures and stuff like that. And so it didn't necessarily come across until you actually were on the set.
When I first walked onto the set, and then I started seeing wardrobe and props and like just all of the man hours and woman hours that went into creating everything. It was a blessing and a curse. The blessing was, okay, well, really, I just have to expose this and it'll look great because so much work has gone in to make this place and the people involved look beautiful. The curse was, if I screw this up, if I do this disservice, it will definitely be on me because everybody else brought their A game. Everybody else brought 110%.
And actually, it's funny you should say that, because about 3 weeks before we started shooting, I wrote all the actors and I said, there's no way for me to impress this until you guys are actually here. But I want you guys to know you seriously need to bring your A game. I mean, theoretically, everybody should bring their A game no matter what. But, you know, a lot of times with independent films, the production values are usually a thing that almost always suffer in an independent film. You can tell the difference between somebody who actually understands production design, like my two production designers, and somebody who just goes, so we've got the room, we're going to shoot in this room. You can't just shoot in a room that you think is just a lived-in kind of place. It's very difficult to do that and make it actually look good on camera. And that's the art of what a production designer knows how to do. They know how to make things look like it's lived in, even though it had to be designed to be that way.
And it was certainly no small feat, because my favorite story to tell everyone, and for anybody listening to the show, when you go and pick up Broken Swords on Blu-ray or DVD and you're watching it, one little kind of like one of those like trivia things like you may not know, or is when you're watching Broken Swords, look at the walls and the ceiling of every room that the characters inhabit. And I'm going to tell you a little secret about that. It looks like centuries old wood on the walls. It's not. And I'm going to give away this little
spoiler
secret. Yeah.
Not really a story spoiler, but now everybody's going to be watching for that, and they're going to try to look for mistakes.
Well, so one of our production designers, Miyuki, once the walls were studded out and the floor plan was made out, she took 4x8 sheets of very thin styrofoam and tagged that to the studs. So now picture a 4x8 white sheet of styrofoam. She tagged these to the studs and then took like a hot air gun and slowly melted the entirety of the 4x8 sheet and by hand carved in all the veins and knots of the wood and then hand painted it. Now, I'm not talking about one room. I'm talking about every room of the set. So you're talking about the square footage I would gather of all the rooms put together is probably about 800 square feet is my guess of all the rooms.
Yeah, that's probably pretty good estimation.
So now picture 800 square feet of walls and ceiling that are being hand carved essentially and hand painted by our production design team. Now, I say that, and even with me telling you that, and this is how much credit is due to the production design team, even with me telling you that, and you going into the Blu-ray when you go and watch Broken Swords, you're still not going to be able to tell the difference. It's going to look like reclaimed century-old wood. So that's just one small, it's not small at all. It's a lot of the set, but it's just one example of just what I walked into on the first day on set.
And we put that kind of detail into not only the physical aspects of the set. If you look at the costumes, the individual stitching that was actually put, because a lot of the shirts, when we got the shirts were bought from a Renaissance company, and many of them were similar shirts. But our costume designer Anne Marie, she took these shirts and she individualized them by putting individualized style stitching, cuts, abrasions, places where they're worn out. My wife, around the time around the time we were getting ready to film, and this is not a slide on this show, so please don't come at me if you love this show, but she was watching this show called Merlin that ran from like 2009 to 2012 or something like that. We have to admit the production value, our costumes and our sets looked so much more lifelike than theirs, because a lot of costumes you see and stuff like this, if it's a dirty world, like the Broken Swords is you're roughly around probably 12th, 13th century Europe is what we kind of went with as an aesthetic. This was not a place where everything was constantly clean, but because you've got certain actors in there, they never really look dirty. Our production values, we always felt were better than that show. That was a gift that the team provided. The same thing with the makeup and the detail that they put into the cuts and the abrasions and the bruises and the dirt and stuff like that. We had this slop jar for the actors. Every morning they would have to put this on, that was the dirt, and then each one would sit in the chair and the individual makeup artist would work on them, whoever was assigned that character. So not only the physical aspects of the world, but then with Chris and I and the details behind the characterizations with the actors as well, them bringing their own takes and their own ideas with all these details went in. The world is just very rich to me, physically and mentally. And I just think there's a lot in there. And if you watch the film and really just go ahead and engage with the film for what it is, I think, it might hopefully stir people's imaginations.
And certainly, even in the smallest of details, that it didn't matter if it made it on screen or not, but one of the details that I think is, you first look at it, you might think, oh, that's just some random markings that, someone put on to make it look cool. But talking about Anne Marie, she actually went back and researched a 4th century dead language.
A BC 4th century.
BC 4th century dead language.
It's called Oakum.
Yeah, Oakum. And incorporated it into a lot of the elements of armor and weapons that the Broken Swords use.
Just to be more specific, it's actually just Marco, because it's part of Marco's slave markings. So if you'll notice, it's all on his armor, and it was in his books and stuff like that, and on his shields and stuff like that. So what she did was she took Oakum, she translated it into Welsh, and then translated she took English phrases like for honor or freedom, things like that. And then she translated that to Welsh, and then she translated the Welsh into Oakum, because there is no translation from Oakum into English. The blessing of all this was a lot of what was part of the unit before. I feel like what we moved into with all of the new people that came in, it was such a blessing, because I think it stepped everything up to a brand new level. I don't know, because we didn't do the shoot in 2016, but my gut instinct is to say that I don't think we would have had the same resulting product if what was intact in 2016 was still intact in 2017. So in many ways, it was really a blessing that happened. I still wish I hadn't had to go through it, because it's very painful.
So now we're at March 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is being talked to about coming back on for the same dates, October into November 2017. From March 2017, what gets us from March 2017 to the start of principal photography? What happens in that time gap?
Yeah, so between February and June 2nd of 2017, it was all about schedule arrangements, pre-production stuff, making decisions about various things, all kind, a lot of logistical stuff. Some people came and went. Some people decided to step out, not be a part of it. New people were brought in. This was all happening around in that time period. So then June 2nd was the date I had set in March for when we were going to launch full balls into pre-production again, into the build-up to principal photography. So from June 2nd until October 27th, it was all about all the planning that we had done, putting it in motion, getting the costumes finished, getting the weapons done, getting the set finished, getting storyboards finished, all those logistical things, finding the rooms for where everybody's going to be staying, getting the meals ready, getting everybody's payment information so that they could be paid. All this kind of stuff was going on during that June, July, August, September, roughly 4.5 month period. Final changes to the script. We were still making lots of changes to the script. We were actually tweaking the script probably up until like the 2 weeks before. And then, on set, there are still things you discover, and you make subtle changes to stuff on once you're even on set. But yeah, so that's really everything. Everything was leading up to that.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks.
And so, the saying goes about best laid plans. So here we are. We're about ready to begin principal photography.
No, you're going to bring it up, aren't you?
And we get one last potentially fatal wrench in the gears.
Yeah. This was October 27th when October 27th was actually when the cast and crew were all meeting for the first time. And that night we were going to do a complete read through, and then we were going to start principal photography the next day. So that was the 27th. Everything is set to go. We are still doing last minute fixes and finishes on the set itself. Anne-Marie's still working on, but all the costumes have been fitted. Almost every single actor that is in the area, and a couple that were not even in the area who came through the area, and we did costume fittings with them. All of this has been done. We've had measurements taken from all the actors actually sent in their measurements. We had them go to a seamstress in their area to get their measurements and sent them to Anne-Marie so she can make certain costumes. So all that's been done. Makeup's all ready to go. Prototypes have been made for some of the makeup. Like Whisper has this gigantic neck scar that she's got on her. That was a prosthetic she had to wear every day she was on the set. So all this is in place. We are about ready to pull the plug. And then on October 25th, 2 days before, one of the actresses calls and quits. I was beyond livid about this because it was entirely unprofessional, because they called to ask about a potential job that they might be getting an audition for that was happening on the shooting schedule was set in April. And actually, we had the shooting day set pretty much in April, and all the actors were told what days they would be shooting. She calls and says, can we arrange this? Can we rearrange this so she could go to this audition? I'm going to tell you right now, as a director, that is not a professional actor, because first of all, the agent should never have sent them on this, because they should have known they were already booked for a 2-week slot that they were secured and it was beginning in 2 days. But because we're an independent film and we're nobody, and this was a potential series and potential reoccurring role. So I said, there is no possible way. We have everything planned down. If we switch something around, it will screw up everything, because we have to move around sets between days, because one room actually doubled for another set, and because the floors were on 2 different areas. The first floor was in the barn. The second floor was built under our carport. So the logistics of how we did that was we would film 3 days in the lower area on those floors. Then we would move up, film 3 days up there, then move back down 3 days up there, and then up. Well, actually, it was the other way around, because we started in the second floor stuff. So anyway, there was no way that this would be possible. And I said, I can't move anything around. And she goes, and this person was like, well, I just think maybe it's time, to move on. And I hung up at that point. Maybe it was a dick move. I don't know. But it was extremely unprofessional, because the actress should never have agreed to do the audition, and the agent should never have committed to it. If we had been any other production, like a named production or something, you can bet your sweet ass that never would have happened. But because we were nobody. So anyway, 2 days before, and the film is an ensemble piece. So it's not like this character was only shooting for 2 days and we would just figure out what to do when her 2 days come out. Every actor except for 2, had between roughly 7 and 11 days on the 15-day shoot. Okay. So very orchestrated, so that they knew when they were going to be here. We could bring them in, we planned everything. But I just said, you know what? There was a great person who had auditioned. We'd done some earlier changes for one of the roles, for the role of Kaylee, because the original actress that was part of that, her schooling wouldn't work out, and we were both brokenhearted, because I loved Leah. She was wonderful, but we had to replace her because her schedule wouldn't work. It's totally fine. And this actress had auditioned for that role, and I had not cast her, but literally like 3 days earlier, she sent me an email, a personalized email that said, I hope you guys have a great shoot. I know you're getting ready to do it. I hope it goes well. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. That was in my mind when this came through. So as soon as I got off the phone, and during her interview, I had remembered she had told me that even though she has a day job, her day job knows she will drop everything at this day job. And they know this. I called her and I said, hey, so we've had a situation. We've lost an actor, the actor playing this role, and we shoot on Saturday. Would you be interested in stepping into the role? She said yes. And the rest is history, because she was a phenomenal replacement. Under the stress of coming in, she didn't have the benefit of the group chats that I would have with people, the talks that I would have with everybody, the individualized personal attention that in the buildup that I would call to have discussions about the characters with the actors. She didn't have the benefit of any of that. She had to come in fairly blind. And I know it must have been intimidating as all get out, but she came in and she hit it with gangbusters. Again, another blessing that worked out far for the better.
I believe I was already in the area.
You were on your way, because you were coming down that day or the next days. I think you were on your way.
I think I flew down that day, because I think you came by the airport to pick me up. We got back to your house, and I think that's when the phone call came in.
Oh, you were here when the phone call actually came in.
Yeah.
So you probably heard my when I hung up, my expletives.
I don't think I heard it, because I think what happened was you picked me up from the airport, we got back to the house, and then you brought me over to Arthur and Tracy's, because that's where I was going to be settling in for the duration. And I think we were going to get together later, and that's when I heard about all of it. Replacement comes in, knocks it out of the park.
Yes.
But now it's go time. Now we're in the trenches.
Yes, and I'm gonna just start off with this description. October 27th to November 13th. This is why I'm a filmmaker. This is what I love. So everything I had done was so I could do what I love to do on set. And personally, I had a fucking blast. Not that there weren't hiccups along the way. There were things that, should have happened and didn't, things that did happen and shouldn't, whatever. Anybody who ever tells me that their productions always go smoothly, I usually generally walk the other way, because they're either lying to you or they're trying to somehow make a promotional out of that, because anybody who's ever actually really made a film, knows that's total bullshit.
Yeah. Or they're just complacent in anything that happens, and that's why it felt like it went smoothly.
Yes. It was a marvelous experience. Everybody working together. On an independent film set, you don't have, like on large film sets, roles are so compartmentalized, because there are very specific things that people, especially when you're involved with unions and all that kind of stuff. So everybody has very specific jobs that you're doing. On independent films, you generally don't have that sort of resource, because you can't always afford to have a first AD, a second AD, a third AD, and a second AD, or whatever they have on some bigger sets and stuff like that. But in general, people really picked up slack to help get things done that needed to be done. If something wasn't there, we had somebody there that could say, hey, I'm going to do this. And we did so much pre-planning in order to make, when the accidents would happen, if we hadn't done so much pre-planning and so much work, and hadn't been at that point, when I got that call from the actors quitting, that could have been even worse, because if I had felt like the production wasn't going to work anyway, that could have just been the last straw. But as it was, despite how mad I was, it's actually kind of funny, because it's like, what else can possibly go wrong? Now, you say that, and there are a lot of things that can go wrong, so you really shouldn't ever say anything like that. So it was just like, but as soon as I hung up the phone, I was like, what have I got to do? What have I got to do? And within 10 minutes, I had the idea, and I actually had the idea for several replacements. The first one was the one that I called, though, and luckily that's the one that came through. So, but I love production as a director. God, I love production. I love being on the set. I love working with the actors. I love working with the cinematographer, the production team. That is what made it for me. All the stuff before and everything that came after, it was those 15 days on set.
Thank you for listening to The Weekend Take. I hope you're enjoying listening to this first part of our two-part episode interviewing Michael Babbitt of Broken Swords and the process of concept to completion. Please be sure to check out part 2 of the interview in our next episode. And be sure to check out The Weekend Take on social media. We're on Facebook at www.facebook.com/The Weekend Take. And please check out our Patreon campaign at www.patreon.com/The Weekend Take, where for as little as $1 per month, you can become a patron of The Weekend Take and get exclusive access to extended cuts of episodes in case you want to hear more of the conversation that Michael and I had today or any other previous episode and guests. You get early access to standard cut release episodes of The Weekend Take. You also get, starting this season, exclusive Patreon patron episodes. And also you get a Weekend Take exclusive sticker to show us off to your friends.
You've been listening to The Weekend Take. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Google Play and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take. And for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks.